Hi, everybody, and welcome to the South Coast Candidate Forum for candidates running in the New South Wales state election. My name's Brad Smith. I'm the Policy Director at the Nature Conservation Council of New South Wales. And the Nature Conservation Council is an independent charity and it's the peak body for conservation groups in New South Wales. The other co-hosts for this event are Birdlife Australia, the Nature Coast Marine Group, the Brooman State Forest Conservation Group, and Manyana Matters. I'd like to thank you all for coming along tonight, as well as our wonderful candidates who have joined us. And before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the Tharawal country and Yuin country that we're meeting on here in the South Coast electorate. And I'd like to acknowledge that sovereignty on this land was never ceded. Pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and also to any First Nations people here today. So let's go through the program for this evening. We'll start with introductions from the candidates, and then we'll go through and let the candidates respond to 5 pre-prepared questions. After that, we'll do some Q&A with questions that are submitted by all of you tonight. So start thinking about what questions you would like to ask the candidates. I'll just go through some of the protocols for this candidates forum on Zoom. So just be aware that because of the numbers of people on the call tonight, all participants will be on mute. You'll be able to put questions and comments in the chat. Also, I want to let everyone know we're recording the session tonight. So anyone who wasn't able to be here can catch up and watch the forum later. But we're just recording the speakers, so you don't have to worry, the participants won't be part of the recording. Just for people who aren't familiar with Zoom, if you want to see the speaker just to make the forum a bit easier to watch, you can use the view button in the top right-hand corner of the screen and choose speaker view, and that'll highlight the person who's speaking. And secondly, you'll find the chat button at the bottom of your screen, and that's where you can type in your questions. And when we come to the Q&A part of the night, we'll get through as many questions as we can, and we'll try and collate and ask first the questions that are asked most often, if there's one question that's asked by a few different people. Please, when you're putting a message in the chat, share it to everyone rather than using a private chat function. That helps us see which of the questions are, the biggest concerns for people in the electorate. After candidates give a response to your question, you can use a reaction function at the bottom of the screen to show your opinion about how well the candidates answered that question. A thumbs up if they gave a great answer, or maybe even a thumbs down if they tried to avoid the question. But of course, we're here in the spirit of having an active democracy where we're sort of working together constructively to make sure there's strong relationships between the candidates and MPs in the region and all the people in the local community. And for the candidates, I'm asking them to keep their responses short, just 2 minutes, so that we can get through all those questions tonight. And please, stick to that time frame, and please try to stick to the point when answering the questions. For the candidates, I'll give you a 30-second warning when the time's almost up, and I'll let you know once 2 minutes is over, just so that we can make sure we hear from all candidates equally. All right, that's all the technical preamble for this evening. So let's get straight into it. And I would like to ask Liza Butler from Labor to give her introduction for tonight. Over to you, Liza. Oh, and we just need to make sure we can unmute Liza so everyone can hear her. There we go. All right, over to you.
Everyone, I thought I was unmuted on my end. Liza Butler, Labor candidate, South Coast. I've put my hand up in this election because I think, it doesn't matter whether you look at environmental laws or what we're seeing with health or housing or education. It's every measurable has gone down, and I'm really concerned about our future and about our communities, especially here on the South Coast, which is why I'm running.
Thanks, Liza. That was very succinct, and that'll give us plenty of time Oh, did you want
Sorry,
to?
I just thought it
If
was
there's
an
anything else you want to say?
introduction. I didn't know if you wanted me to do a full, 5-minute speech, which I can, but if you just want a quick introduction.
Yeah, but I appreciate the brevity. That's great. But yeah, we do have, so we've got 2 minutes scheduled for each of these introductions. So you've got about a minute to go. If you want to tell us any more about, the issues that you're most passionate about making a difference for on the South Coast, then go for it.
The issues that I'm most passionate about is health, housing, and education. And a lot of those things fall into the questions that you've got to tonight. But we're at a crisis point in housing on the South Coast. We're at a crisis point in health services, and we're at a crisis point in education. And, we need to do something about it. We need to do something about it urgently. What really concerns me is that in a lot of places, unless they're directly affected by environmental issues, it's not on people's radar at the moment, because those issues around health and housing are so critical. It's, Maverick's pyramid of need is that, they start thinking about themselves and the environment slips off. And that just shows you what a desperate situation New South Wales is in right now, because so many people are worried about where they're going to live next week or food on the table, that environmental issues are slipping off. It just shows you that we're in desperate need of a change of government that has people supported, so then we can support the environment.
Thanks so much, Liza. That's great. And now I'd like to pass over to Amanda Findley from the Greens for your 2-minute introduction.
Thanks.
And let's just make sure
Brad.
that we've got you on mute. That's great.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And in my introduction this evening, I want to acknowledge the country that I'm sitting on, and that the custodianship of Aboriginal people across Australia didn't see the extinction loss that we have seen in the 200 years since settlement, or 200 plus years since settlement. And I pay my respects to that ancient knowledge that has kept the land in such great shape. I really feel that depth of pain, that eco-suffering, eco-grief that we're all carrying on board, particularly in the last 5 years and in this critical decade where we've seen so little action on climate change. We've seen extinctions increase, and we have in many ways despaired over a bunch of things. What made me enter politics a long time ago, and how it feels like, was that despair of watching the environment around me on the South Coast just be destroyed by development. The first thing that actually radicalized me into that action as an early person, in early childhood, it would have been around the anti-nuclear disarmament discussion. But then when I came to the South Coast in the mid-90s, there'd just been a massive win by the people of Conjola around putting some of Conjola into National Park, and they've been battling logging around that area for some time. And I was a part owner in a farm at Brooman for over 20 years. And every time we took our kids to the farm, what did we see was the destruction of the forest around us. So, I've been very much involved over the years, not so much in the last 5 as being mayor, but, up until that point, I was in the thick of things with the Southeast Forest movement. And being a member of the Greens, the Greens have been there with the Southeast Forest movement for such a long time and have had policies in place. And it was those policies that I wanted to advance in those early days.
Thanks, Amanda. That was precisely 2 minutes. So I appreciate that. All right. Well, thanks so much for those introductions. Let's get into those first 5 questions that we have pre-prepared. And the first question we have is from Birdlife Australia. So I'm going to pass to Andrew, who's here from Birdlife Australia, to ask that question. Andrew, if you can come off mute.
Thanks, Brad, and thank you to all the candidates for taking some of your time away from your very busy schedules, I'm sure, tonight. And I apologize, I can't turn on my camera. I'm having a bit of a technical difficulty, but I'll jump into my question now. So swift parrots are one of the most threatened birds in Australia, with an estimated wild population of only 750 birds left. The main threat to their survival is habitat destruction. and the south coast of New South Wales is one of their most important habitats. And after being severely damaged by the Black Summer bushfires, this area is still being extensively logged. Unless decisive action is taken to prevent further destruction of their forest homes, swift parrots face extinction within the next 20 years. Should you be elected, will you commit to ending native forestry operations within swift parrot and other threatened species habitat? Thank you.
So Brad, my microphone is open and I'm happy to jump on in and answer Andrew's fabulous question.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Yeah, I was just muted myself, so sorry about that. Yeah, I'd love you to answer first, and then I'll go to Liza second on this one.
Yeah. So Andrew, the Greens have been unashamedly at the very forefront of saying that we need to end native forest logging in New South Wales right now. We can't wait. We can't continue to, think that this, this dying industry is a good industry for this, for the coast in particular. And while we're at it, we need to expand the protected areas that we have across New South Wales, because we've only got 9.6% of New South Wales protected at this moment in time, and we need to really build that up to 30%. So the Greens have a transition plan to get us out of native forest logging and to get us into softwood and plantation timbers. I hear all the time the mythology that, we need, the hardwood forests for building materials, but, I don't know any modern carpenter who can put a nail through a hardwood frame. In fact, they all walk away from it. And it's all softwood framing that's happening, and a lot of imported materials coming into this country. So it's a big yes from the Greens, and it's not a slow yes, and it's a transition that's been thought out and costed.
Thanks so much, Amanda, for that response. I'll go to Liza Butler from Labor, but before I do, we've got a question in the chat from Judy Fitzgerald. She asks, where is the Liberal candidate Luke Sikora? And sorry I didn't mention that at the start of the meeting, everyone. So I just wanted to say that we did invite Luke Sikora. We tried to find a time that would work for him, but unfortunately he wasn't available at any of the times when the other candidates were available. So he's not here tonight. And we also invited him to provide written responses to our prepared questions, but he also declined to do that, unfortunately. So on that note, I'd like to pass to Liza Butler from Labor to answer that question on swift parrots. And
unmuted. Sorry, I dropped out there. Look, I'll just say number one, that Labor's committed to saving threatened species and by protecting their habitat, and we're increasing national parks by 140,000 hectares if elected, and we'll assess another 176,000 hectares of state forest. And there's a national parks establishment plan that actually hasn't been addressed by the Liberal National Government for a number of years. I think it was due about 3 years ago to be looked at. It hasn't even picked up. We'll redo that report and identify key habitat and wildlife corridors so we can protect them into the future. And as for the logging of native forests, there's a report from the inquiry into the long-term sustainability and future of the timber and forest products industry that was recently released. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We're going to actually action the findings in that report. And one of the findings was that the timber sector has suffered from a long-term vision of, about how the government has failed to invest and extend plantation timbers, and that's exacerbated the current supply. So we will move into state-owned timber plantations, and in light of the 2019-20 bushfires, we will look at current logging in state forests such as Brooman, and to see whether it's actually the best use or to stop it straight away. So we'll look at forests as a whole and actually determine whether logging is actually the best use, because what's the price of a tree? It might be better used as a carbon offset or other inputs. And so we are committed to working with local communities, residents and Aboriginal communities. But we are, and the other thing about threatened species, we want to work cooperatively with the Commonwealth Government to meet the objectives of the Threatened Species Action Plan. So, it's about two levels of government working together. If we have a Liberal national government, they are not going to work with the Commonwealth Plan to address threatened species of, 2022-32.
Thanks, Liza. All right. So let's move on to the next question, which is from the Nature Coast Marine Group. And I think we have Dane here tonight to ask that question.
Dane, if you could just pop your hand up if you're here, because I can't see your name.
Oh, there he is.
Participants.
iPhone.
Is it iPhone? Which iPhone?
Yeah, I think I've got him here. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, Dane, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I had an issue with unmuting. Okay, I'm just trying to bring the question up so I can read it clearly. Okay, here we go. Sorry about this. Okay, our question is, under the Labor government in the early 2000s, 6 marine parks were established and placed in the environment portfolio of that government. Under the Liberal National Government in 2011, marine parks were changed and placed in the Department of Primary Industries and Fisheries portfolio. This change has been quoted by many stakeholders, including Indigenous fishers, as the equivalent of the fox mining the chook house. If elected, would you vote to support putting marine parks back into the environment portfolio?
Thanks so much, Dane and Nature Coast Marine Group, for that question. So for this one, I'd like to go to Liza first from Labor.
So am I unmuted?
You are loud and clear, and you've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, I can't tell. Look, Labor created marine parks in New South Wales, and we're extremely proud of that, and we're proud of that legacy, and we'll continue to support marine parks to conserve our marine environment. And we want to achieve 30% marine park protected areas by 2030. And we don't believe that it sits well in fisheries right now. And we've seen here on the South Coast that our marine parks have been wound back. We don't think that is a good thing. We'll also restore the role of advisory committees for marine parks, and we'll bring scientists, stakeholder groups together to look at those marine park conservation into the future. So, we want to enable people to enjoy the ocean and enjoy marine parks full stop. So yes, we are looking closely at where they will sit in the future, but we don't believe that it's right with fisheries, but we do have a big target to make them 30% by 2030.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liza. And over to Amanda for your response to that question on marine parks.
Thanks. And I feel like I've got a declaration of interest to make right here. And that is that I'm currently the chair of the Jervis Bay Marine Park Committee and have been the chair of that committee for the last 6.5 years. And as part of the work that I've done on the Marine Park Committee it's been quite challenging over the last couple of years. And it's been really challenging because the LNP governments, the way that they've reviewed marine parks and the way that they've pretty much, I'll just use the word disemboweled the committees, have made it, pretty disheartening for all of the committee members to turn up to do that work. So not only would the Greens get rid of it out of fisheries, because yes, that's absolutely the fox in the hen house, it would be, to commence some changes in the current legislation that's managing the marine parks and also to make sure that the membership of the committees aren't captured by the shooters and fishers party. You know, we've seen some pretty diabolical issues happening down in the not in the Jervis Bay, in the Bateman's Marine Park, where, you know, you had people there lobbying to get people on board to that committee who just did not even have a conservation bone in their body. So that needs to be done. And the review also needs to be done where, you know, some of the areas that there've been some issues in Jervis Bay where the fishermen and conservation, they want to trade some places out, and they've done the analysis on it and they've done the scientific work, and they know that this particular swap that they want done will work. But again, the government haven't been listening. And when you look at the data that's coming out of what's going on in the Jervis Bay Marine Park, you know that marine parks work. And that getting that expansion of them is really important, but also making sure that, you know, we've got the issues of the port of Wollongong. We need to make sure that if the Wollongong port is going to expand, that we don't have ballast and marine bilge coming into that area so that it doesn't contaminate the marine park that we've got. Because, as you know, getting rid of feral marine species or non-native marine species is a pretty difficult task to do. So I think that the Greens have got a fairly comprehensive understanding of marine parks, getting rid of shark nets and all of those types of things, and making sure that we do have maximum amount of protection in place is really important.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, well, we're up to the third pre-prepared question, and after that we'll go to a Q&A. We've already got a few questions in the chat, so please feel free to add your question or, you know, or highlight somebody else's question if you want to make sure that one's asked. But the next question we have is from Manyana Matters, and we've got Bill to ask that question. Do you want to ask your question, Bill? All right, Bill, I've just got to unmute you first. So there we go. All right, we've got you now. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda and Liza. The South Coast is defined by our beautiful coastal villages and our magnificent forests and biodiversity. Yet this is all threatened by the onslaught of inappropriate developments. How would you fix environmental and planning laws so that development applications that displace or kill threatened species are knocked back, and only developments that are truly in harmony with our area are approved?
Thanks, Bill. So I think we're up to Amanda going first on this one. So over to you, Amanda from the Greens.
Sure. So, Bill, what we see right now is a really broken offset system in New South Wales, and that needs to be, well, I think that it actually needs to be gone completely, not just reviewed, because it's a ridiculous notion that you can bulldoze one place and expect to hold on to somewhere else to, you know, make sure that the species that we want to protect are actually protected. One of the policy platforms of the Greens is to return planning to New South Wales councils, and to let councils do the work that instead of the New South Wales state government, because all too often what we see from the New South Wales government is that they overrule what it is that the community want. I mean, and just before Christmas, they sneakily brought in a rezoning pathways program to allow developers of land the opportunity to have the New South Wales government continue to approve subdivisions without even allowing councils to look at it, and then trying to swear council staff to secrecy. And I think that that's just an appalling situation. The other thing that's obviously bugging a lot of people across New South Wales are zombie DAs and zombie subdivisions. And there needs to be an instant moratorium on that. You know, if you've got one of those, you've got 12 months to prove your worth and, you know, get that out of the mothballs and get on with it. Otherwise, they need to be cancelled. You know, the only positive change, I think, in the planning schemes over the last 5 years was the Rob Stokes amendment that made development applications expire after 5 years if there hadn't been substantial starting, and that didn't mean a peg in the ground, which we see all too often across New South Wales. So, you know, it's planning coming back to the community is where we will get the very best outcomes for native species, and to make sure that the planning is correct, because we're the ones on the ground who know where the greater gliders are. We're the ones on the ground who know where the swift parrots are. It's not the developers, and they're paid for product, people who are going out and surveying their grounds for us.
Yep.
Thanks, Amanda, for addressing that question. And now over to Liza from Labor to answer the question from Manyana Matters.
Look, I totally agree. You know, the South Coast is extremely beautiful, and it's our little coastal villages and our hamlets that make it so. And, you know, living here is, we've all come here for a lifestyle, and our businesses rely on tourism. And the minute that our coastal villages don't look like that anymore, we're going to lose that, and we will lose our lifestyle. So, number one, I think we need to urbanise our town centres of Nowra and Ulladulla to help protect our coastal villages, because, you know, we are having to grow and we need affordable housing. And what developments such as Manyana are, they will never be affordable. We'll see more Airbnbs, and we need to address, you know, the housing crisis. But back to the planning, look, currently in our planning laws, we have no red lines where a developer actually, it says no more. They're actually being designed for developers to work around and, you know, get to the next issue and work around it. So we need to tighten that up. And we've also seen under the Liberal National Government, environmental laws have either been removed or watered down, and Labor will return and strengthen those laws so that, you know, developments such as Manyana are protected into the future. We also want to review the Biodiversity Conservation Act, because basically it's the offset scheme is broken, and we want to set up a pathway to fix it, and we want to make sure that it's you know, extremely rigorous and what options we can to reform the failed biodiversity offset scheme so that we prevent an ecological disaster in New South Wales in the future. So we need to look at our planning laws, as Amanda said, but we really need to look at that offset scheme, because that allows developers to get around some of these environmental laws. And that's one of the first things that Labor will do.
Thank you, Liza.
Thanks so much, Liza. All right, well, we're almost, we do actually have two more pre-prepared questions. So the next one comes from the Brooman State Forest Conservation Group, and we've got Takisa Frank to ask that question.
Hello, everyone. So our question from the group is, do you support the New South Wales government with industry to 100% plantation plan on marginal agricultural land to markedly increase local wood processing jobs and wood supply for housing?
Great, thanks, Takisa. And I'd like to invite Liza to answer that question first from Labor.
Look, it's probably not much different to the first question about native logging. Yes, we support a transition into plantation timber and onto agricultural land, and we will review those forests that were hit by fires to ensure that they are suitable for logging at the moment, while we look at that long-term sustainability and the report that I mentioned earlier. And other than what I said earlier, there's I don't really have anything extra to add to that. But we want to ensure that all communities, and workers are transitioned, and we would like to create tourism jobs for those, because I think forests, like I said before, what's the price of a tree? Is it, $1,000, $1 million? Create those. Create new jobs, create tourism through it, but also have an evidence-based approach on what we do into the future.
Thanks, Liza. And now over to Amanda from the Greens on plantations?
Thanks. So we do need to expand plantations in New South Wales, and we have to do it on marginal agricultural land that's already been cleared, not the class 1 agricultural lands that we see on the coast, because they've tried those experiments on the coast already, and we see some of the remnants of that a lot, in places like Baril at the Pines there. There was an old pine forest out near Manyana that was put in as an experimental lot and was also a failure. So, but making sure that, no scoundrel gets to chop down a native forest in order to put in a pine plantation, right? Because that's just a hideous result and would be completely the opposite to what we're expecting. The other thing is that in New South Wales, they claim that, well, we know it. We see the wood chipping logs heading down to Eden. We've counted the trucks on numerous times, and we see the pile of chips that sit down off Edram Road there. And so we need to actually think about outside the box when it comes to fibre, and why don't we actually have a hemp industry in New South Wales that could take over that fibre? And that would help the coastal properties to get into the idea that there's more, more money to be made when it comes to, farming for fibre or farming for other things. So, we've made extraordinary discoveries over the last decade when it comes to, using innovative approaches to product. And I think that we can do that in New South Wales successfully and augment what's going on in the softwood plantations. But yes, definitely, getting that transition happening, ensuring that no native forests are damaged in that process, and making sure that there's an equivalent industry in fibre on the coast, as pine doesn't work particularly well there.
Thanks, Amanda, for that question. All right, our last pre-prepared question is on climate and energy. And I'm going to ask this one. So we're in a climate crisis. The South Coast knows that more than anywhere with the extreme fires. And we're also in an energy price crisis. Will you address both of these by rolling out a household energy efficiency package so that people can save money, save energy, and protect the climate? This should include things like minimum efficiency standards for rental properties, which are often the most expensive homes to heat and cool, as well as solar on public housing and community housing, and additional rebates to help more households get off gas and improve the efficiency and healthiness of their homes and appliances. So Amanda from the Greens, over to you first.
All right. So Brad, it actually kind of feels like that may have even been written from the Greens policy, because the Greens policy is very much in favour of making sure that all public housing does have solar, and making sure that we've got 100% renewables by 2030. Because if we don't do that, we're in deep doo-doo. I mean, we already know that we're in that space. And for the South Coast electorate, there's been 11 natural disasters in the last 3 years, starting with the 2019-2020 fires. Well, actually, you could probably even call it 12, because we came out of that drought and we've been dealing with those impacts ever since. And it's going to take some time to turn that around. And unless we do the 100% renewables by 2030, then the next generation are going to be dealing with an absolute horror story. We can do it with wind and solar. We don't need to resort to any of these other corny things that people are talking about at the moment, like nuclear. And I keep getting cornered about that. We also need to look at the short-lived climate pollutants like methane, and making sure that methane's dealt with in a serious way. And I've got runs on the board here because I've been helping out with a digester here in the South Coast, which will take methane emissions from dairy farms and turn those methane emissions into the gas to power a powered station. I've also been campaigning and lobbying for quite a while now on the refresh of the housing that's here, to make sure that the homes that we have are well insulated, and so that they don't cost a fortune to heat. When we look to other parts of the world, we see other parts of the world that are doing this so much better, whether it's white goods in cold countries, or whether it's heating and cooling in other countries. We continue to export our brain power from here, and we need to just get it back onshore. And we need to make sure that not only are we doing the energy things, that we're looking at the energy efficiency and water efficiency as well, so that we're not pumping clean water down a toilet, for instance, and that we make sure that we recycle water wherever we can.
Thanks for that response, Amanda. So Liza from Labor, over to you on household energy efficiency.
Look, it's one of our big policies, and it's probably the one I'm really excited about. But, you know, we're going to create the New South Wales State Energy Security Corporation, and we'll move into renewables, and we'll be 50% renewable in just 7 years' time, 2030, and hopefully as close as possible to 100% renewable energy by 2050. And you know, one of the big things is putting community batteries in. It'll be the single biggest investment into renewable energy in New South Wales history ever. It'll create jobs, construction, and, you know, contribute to electrical sectors. So community batteries and renewables are a way of the future. Where I live, for the last 3 years, I've been involved in getting a microgrid and a community battery here, and we're just about to see that to fruition. I've already been in discussions with Endeavour Energy to the next cab off the rank. They'd really like to see Kalala do that, and with Labor supplying the community batteries as we have planned, it means that they will be able to provide grant incentives for people to put solar panels on the roof and to put Tesla batteries in to help feed into that. You need 20% of communities to have either solar or a Tesla battery to feed into community batteries. So, you know, we're really serious about protecting the environment. We also support wind farms off the coast. And so our, you know, a big clean energy plan for New South Wales that is renewables that I am excited about, because it will create jobs. And the other thing that linking into that is that we will manufacture those here. We're already mining the minerals out of the ground, sending them overseas to make the solar panels and then buying them back. We want to make those things here. We want to make the wind turbines here and get New South Wales onto renewable energy to cut the costs down for our community as soon as possible.
Thanks, Liza. All right, well, that's all the prepared questions we had. So I'm really excited to get into some of the questions that have been posted in the chat. We've got quite a lot, and the monitoring team's been finding the ones that have been asked most often. So the first one is also about logging. It looks like that's a big issue for folks here tonight. And it goes to Big Spotty. So in the North Brooman State Forest, there's a tree called Big Spotty. It's the tallest spotted gum in the world, and it's well over 500 years old. But alarmingly, Forestry Corporation has scheduled that forest for logging in the next 12 months. If elected, what will you do to protect this magnificent asset so that it can be enjoyed by local, domestic, and international tourists for generations to come? Liza, over to you first.
Well, you know, one of the things we've said we're going to do is to look at whether those logging plans are still up to date because of, you know, the bushfires. Another thing that I'd like to add is that currently the EPA is responsible for monitoring the logging coups and whether they're actually following the plans. And there's only 2 inspectors for the whole of New South Wales. They cannot actually monitor those logging coups. So we'd like to address that. But trees such as Big Spotty, look, seriously, there's 2 here that I know of. One, there's Old Blotchy as well as Big Spotty. Old Blotchy's not in a logging area, but those trees definitely need to be protected, and I will be fighting for that. And I know that Penny Sharp would not be, who's the Shadow Minister for Environment, would not be up for seeing trees such as that are such old growth to be logged in the future.
Thanks, Liza. Amanda.
Thanks, Brad. So South Coast is in a really unique position right now, and it's in the very unique position where if you voted in a representative for the Greens, that representative of the Greens would be sitting at a negotiating table talking to a minority government who needed the Greens party to make government And if I happen to be that representative that you choose, I can tell you that the cessation of native forest logging is one of the #1 things at the top of my list. And why is it so? Because it has to stop and it cannot go on any longer. And Nick, the only other way that you could negotiate that position would be to ensure that, if no one wanted to get to the negotiation table, would be to again stop the logging in that particular coupe and make sure that that became a priority. But I really think that opportunity to sit at the negotiation table and put that at the top of the list in New South Wales is one of those moments that we can actually make history and get this to stop after 3 decades of campaigning.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, the next question goes to housing, and there's been a lot of interest in that tonight. So how can we keep providing housing for the ever-growing population on the South Coast, which is coming from people moving to the area and immigration, and at the same time protect our beautiful forests and threatened wildlife? When will governments tackle this issue and work out how to live with a sustainable economy rather than continuing to grow? So Amanda, over to you first.
I note in that question, there's the issue about overpopulation. And look, I really just want to put it on the table that at the moment we've got an over-house supply. What we have a real crisis in is a crisis of greed. Because if you look across the South Coast, there are 26% of the homes in this area that are vacant nearly every single night of the week in this place. And we've got all of these people who are desperate to get into affordable housing. And what we actually need is a complete structural change where federal, local and state work together to do something about that situation, because it's dismal that, some people can accumulate housing as wealth accumulation while others can't even get an affordable roof over their head. But I think that, I'll just leave that piece of philosophy with you to think about where you're best spending time on it. But, I grew up in Northern Ireland, and in growing up in Northern Ireland, we all had a council, what was called a council house if you didn't live in private homes. And those council houses were small apartments or small terraces. And unfortunately, the idea that everybody can live on a quarter-acre block, but I mean, even that's a massive dream, and more like 500 square meters these days. We've got to rethink the horizontal living, and we have to go into vertical living, and that's not going to be pretty for some. And it's going to have to happen in those town centres where the sacrifices will need to be made, rather than eating into more forest and to more land. And places like the South Coast, we also have to be completely cognizant of the fact that we've got a great environment here, and why can't we have precious places that don't get overdeveloped for the sake of the nation? Because right now, the New South Wales government is ramming more and more development down our throat without us having a real and proper say in it.
Thanks, Amanda. And Liza, do you want to have a go at that question?
Yeah, sure. Look, I was saying earlier that we need vertical living. We need to develop our town centres of Ulladulla and Nowra with great urban design, with, make those town centres vibrant. We do have too many, either holiday residents or Airbnb, which really affects the livability. And as I said before, when you do developments, whether it's Kalala, West Culburra, Manyana, they are not going to be affordable living for people to get into. What Labor is going to do for affordable housing is those 2-bedroom apartment style living in town centres close to services, especially for our essential workers, because we cannot get, nurses, teachers, paramedics, fireys, can't find somewhere to live. So we need to build those in our town centres, while we protect our smaller communities from overdevelopment and clear felling, so that people do have an affordable place to live. And we need to address that Airbnb issue, but that is, you know, that is going to be tough. If you put a bed tax in, they're just going to put the price up. So we have to work towards making those houses that, you know, where I live, it used to be 1 in 4 was permanently lived in. It's now 50-50 since COVID. It has changed a bit, but we need to address the number of empty houses up and down the coast before we start developing those, you know, smaller coastal communities.
Thanks, Liza. So a lot of agreement about some solutions there, which is heartening. The next question I have here is that Australian native forest flora and fauna has evolved through many thousands of years of fire stick farming practices by Indigenous people. These same forests have been extensively logged since white settlement, and that has largely resulted in forests that resemble little similarity to the native forests that were there more than 200 years ago. The fires we experienced in 2019-20 will continue with increasing intensity unless forests are managed in some capacity for fire. And if we end native forestry operations, how will the fuel loads and the fire risks from these forests be managed? Over to you, Liza, first.
Look, you know, most of those fuel loads are in our national parks, and the Liberal National Government have decimated national parks. All the skilled men and women that were very knowledgeable about fire, most of them had to reapply for their jobs a couple of years ago, and we've lost them out of the sector. When the Liberals talk about that they've put so much money into national parks, it's about luxury accommodation is where they've put the money, and they've taken out you know, the men and women on the ground that actually undertook that vital work. Labor will put those staff back on the ground so that they can manage it. They were really skilled. My husband has worked for national parks and is a firefighter for 37 years. He was the only one in the Ulladulla region that didn't have to apply for his job. I think it was only because they knew they'd have to pay him out so much money because he'd been there so long. Everyone else was lost. They've decimated national parks. So we need to bring that back. We need to have cultural burning practices brought into national parks to work alongside them. And it's a really big issue all over the state about the decimation that they have done to staff, and we need to really address that.
Thanks, Liza. And Amanda, over to you.
Thanks. Look, one of the things that we have to be really certain of is where we put fire and how we use it. You know, there was a recent forum in Ulladulla that made it very clear that old growth forests were the least likely to burn, where the nature of the forest controlled the amount of litter, that leaf litter that you know, was reaching the forest floor. Changing the mindset of people who live close to forested areas, who somehow think that, you know, burning vast acres of forest is, you know, going to protect them when the proverbial happens. It is incorrect, and we need to get the way that we manage the urban interface is actually the most important way that we can manage, you know, do this work. So, and when we do it, we need to do it with our First Nations people. I walked country with Uncle Vic Channel only 3 weeks ago. It was quite a hot day. And he had the fire sticks going, and there was a little bit of a wind there. And I know that the Conjola people who were with us were feeling very nervous about that practice. But because there was so much moisture in the forest floor, that was a fire that you could basically walk alongside. And the way that that practice worked, which pulled, you know, debris away from major plants that needed to be protected, was, you know, it was an extraordinary thing to be part of. And we really need to make sure that we support our First Nations people to regain knowledge where they may have lost it, and connect them with the fire stick practitioners to make sure that we've got enough people to be able to do this. And as Liza said, we're totally on a unity ticket when it comes to, you know, reinvesting in our national parks, and not just into Flash Camp, but into the work that needs to be done, because it's just abominable that there are still people who don't know the outcome of their job applications or have a permanent job within that system.
Wonderful. Thanks, Amanda. All right, so moving from fire to water, this one goes back to the marine parks. So recognizing that 80% of marine parks are presently open to recreational fishing, what will you do that can restore full no-take protection to those sanctuary zones that have been undermined by the present government through opening them up to various forms of recreational fishing? So Amanda from the Greens, you're up first.
Yeah, so we need to actually just get in place that we need to have 30% of every marine ecosystem represented within the marine park. So at the moment, we're not seeing those marine protected areas. You know, there's far too much activity in them. The other thing that we're also suffering is not just from fishing, is also from the use of personal watercraft in sensitive seagrass areas. So we need to really look at that review very quickly. You know, the review work that's been done in the last 3 years leaves a lot to be desired. Science has already proven to us that the no-take zones work, and we do need to make sure that they're reinstated as quickly as possible, and not just leave that to chance, because again, we're missing out on, you know, vital habitats that you know, should be protected, and we're heading down the extinction pathway rapidly with marine biology as well, with the warming of the ocean. So we've got to move quickly, and we can't afford to wait.
Thanks, Amanda. And now to Liza. Liza, would you restore the full no-take protection to those sanctuary zones?
Well, first of all, I agree with Amanda. I'd love to see jet skis banned, full stop. This, you know, I call them the scour of the ocean, because they do destroy, you know, habitat, and, you know, they're just terrible. But look, we'll restore the role of advisory committees for marine parks, and bring the scientists, you know, into that mix, because, you know, they are the ones that, you know, really should be determining where we go with our complex marine conservation. But like I said, we want to have 30% of our coastline as protected areas by 2030. That's only 7 years. So I think that's a really great target to have in such a short time frame. It's we want community to be able to enjoy it, and I think to do that we can bring tourism, so we can have snorkeling, scuba lessons up the coast, and reduce our taking fish from the ocean, and protecting those coastal areas. Yeah, I think we have a really strong plan around that. Like I said, Labor created marine parks. We want to see them strengthened and growing into the future.
Thanks, Liza. All right, well, we've only got 6 minutes left before 7:30 and we close the meeting. So we've just got probably 2 short questions. Hopefully we can squeeze in. The next one comes from Craig. He asks, if you win your election, what measures will you implement to improve accountability and transparency within your electorate? And maybe he means within the state as well. Liza, over to you first.
Oh, look, I actually, one of the reasons I'm running, because I don't think that the current government is very transparent at all. I think there's seems to be a lot of things not upfront. So for me personally, in my electorate, I'll be very open and transparent. I will be having lots of community consultations on any issue that is before Parliament, so that you need someone that has a seat at the main table that can take the issues that you're concerned about directly to the Cabinet for consideration, and totally open, transparent. We're setting up, Labor will set up independent regulatory reviews of anything that's happening within government, so that it is transparent. We want any grants, pork barrelling that you saw with the bushfire money that didn't go to any seat that was held by Labor. Bushfire grant money only went to places where there was a Liberal incumbent. We want processes like that to be done independently outside of government so that that is totally open and transparent. And, we don't want to see lots of the rorts that have been happening in the current government. Little period there, every other week there was something new, jobs for the boys or bushfire, extortion. So we will put measures in at every place so that it is a totally open and transparent government.
Thanks, Liza. And now over to you, Amanda. What would you do to improve accountability and transparency?
One of the first things that we need to stop in this state is political donations to parties from, Clubs New South Wales, from the coal and gas industry, from the developer industry, and if an immediate disclosure in the interim about when political parties are getting that. So, the Greens don't accept donations from those big interests, so we don't have, a hand up our back whenever it comes to making decisions. And the other thing we need to do is to fully fund ICAC and make sure that ICAC has an independent funding source rather than just, the government squeezing the neck of it as well. When it comes to, and I'll be on a unity ticket with Liza around accountability and openness when it comes to local issues, because what we get gobbledygook delivered by the state government, and then we're expected to read thousands of pages of technical instruments and then give an informed position, and that's just not on. We need to really filter that down into everyday language and tell people how it's actually going to impact them instead of creating barriers and walls that people can't get over. So, there's a real opportunity for that to happen at a local level and for it to be done in a way that's groundbreaking for the rest of New South Wales, because, if we don't commit to having better access into changes that are happening at government, then what we end up with is things like, the anti-protester laws at the moment. That's a pretty despicable position to be in. Did we get a say on that? No, we didn't. And, things like that need to be reversed and fair and square in the public space so that we've got the time and the opportunity to put the political pressure on those that are in power.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, well, we're almost at time. I've got one quick question. It might be a bit cheeky, but let's give it a go. Someone's has said, it sounds like you two could be a great team. How are you distributing your preferences? And have you thought about job sharing? I'm not sure how that would work, but Amanda, do you want to go with that first?
Well, we already are a great team on Shoalhaven City Council, which is awesome. It's really been great to have Liza come on in the last, just over a year. She's really taken to that like a duck to water. Go, Liza. I really enjoy her company. She's a good human being. And so that means that I would very happily hand out a piece of paper that says vote 1 Amanda Findley, 2 for Liza Butler, because, that's a good option as far as I'm concerned. But, let's make sure that we tell our friends that that's the options that are on the table and not let our, the opportunity to give a preference fall on the floor. Because if you only vote 1 for one person, regardless of who it is, if we're serious, the mission here is to knock off the Liberals in New South Wales and to get a better outcome for the environment. The only way that we can do that is to do that with a unified position and have 1, 2, and whichever way that you decide tonight to do that is entirely up to you. It'd be nice to job share. Then that means that we would have partly have a life each. But yeah, that would really rock the boat of democracy and wouldn't be too bad, I don't reckon.
Thanks, Amanda. And over to you, Liza from Labor.
Look, I totally agree with Amanda. We need a progressive government and we need to get rid of the Liberals. And Labor and the Greens know that by going 1, 2, whichever way you decide, will help change the government. And, I feel that this is the most important election that we've had in a bloody long time. In fact, I can't remember a state election where I was so concerned where if the Liberals got in, what they would do in the next 4 years. So yes, 1 and 2, Labor and Greens, please tell your friends that will, help change the government. I'd like to have a seat at the table, as I'm sure Amanda would. I think having someone who's a part of the party that's in government, because I'm pretty sure, if I was a betting person, I would bet that Chris Minns will be the next Premier of New South Wales, and I'd like to have a seat at the table. And, I totally agree that Amanda and I have different strengths that we would bring to the table, but at the end of the day, we need to have either Labor or Greens sitting in the seat of South Coast.
Thanks, Liza. All right, well, on that note, I'd like to wrap up tonight. Thank you to the candidates, Liza Butler from Labor, and of course, Amanda from the Greens. And I'd like to thank, Amanda Findley from the Greens. I'd like to thank all of the groups that co-hosted the event tonight. So Birdlife Australia, Nature Coast Marine Group, Brooman State Forest Conservation Group, and Manyana Matters, as well as the Nature Conservation Council. To everyone on the call, please get involved with your local environment groups. They do amazing work. If you're interested in helping out ahead of the state election to make sure that more voters in the South Coast electorate know about the parties who have strong environmental positions, like we've heard tonight, please jump to the Nature Conservation Council website at nature.org.au and sign up to hand out scorecards or join your one of the other great local environment groups. So thanks a lot, everybody. I hope you've had a wonderful night, and thanks to the candidates, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
thanks for the
guys.
participants. Good night.
See ya.